I am Malachi Reyes, presenting with Austin Gale and Mary Todd Lincoln. Mary Todd Lincoln is one of the more famous women in American history, being known for being the 16th president, Abraham Lincoln's wife, and ultimately the title of the First Lady of the United States. Mary Todd Lincoln was born on December 13, 1818 in Lexington, Kentucky, as the fourth child of the Todd family. Todd was a prominent name in Kentucky. Her father, Robert Todd, was the son of Levi Todd, one of the founders of Lexington. Mary's father was a successful merchant and politician. In return, the Kentucky legislature named him head of the Lexington branch of the Bank of Kentucky. Mary's mother, Eliza, died in childbirth on December 13, 1818. Within several months, her father soon remarried a woman by the name of Betsy Humphreys. 9 more children were brought into the house upon the 7 that were already there. The new stepmother was not accepted by the late Eliza's mother, who lived next door to the Todds, until Robert purchased a larger home a few blocks away. Betsy and the children of Robert's first marriage were often at loggerheads. Robert's hasty courtship, Grandmother Parker's disapproval, and the fact that Betsy appears to have been more of a disciplinarian than Eliza all likely contributed to the situation. Betsy never liked her stepchildren and maintained a difficult connection with them. In return, Mary never had an adequate relationship with their stepmother and most of her family members. She then spent most of her teenage life in a boarding school and enjoyed the education that she was fortunate enough to receive. She describes her childhood as desolate and found the school she was attending, men tell, to be her second home. Despite the changes in her life, she had a great reputation among people who knew her. At 5'2" in maturity, Mary had clear blue eyes, long lashes, light brown hair with a tinge of bronze, and an attractive complexion. At the age of 21, she left the home that brought various tragedies to her life and resided with her sister, Elizabeth Edwards, in Springfield, Illinois. While living in Springfield, Mary attracted numerous admirers, including upcoming politicians and lawyers, Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas. Abraham, who was 9 years older than Mary, was soon rejected by her family due to the faintly amount of formal education he received, a poor birth background, and a huge difference in age. Though Mary's family disapproved of the relationship between she and Abraham, the two had shared the same interests in politics, literature, and maintained a fondness relationship, leading to their marriage on November 4, 1842, in Springfield, Illinois. Mary would give birth to 4 children, all boys, only the first, Robert Todd, named after Mary's father, who would live through adulthood. Among his many successes, he would become Secretary of War, Minister to London, President of the Pullman Car Company, and a millionaire. The other children were Edward Eddie Baker, 1846 to 1850. This child's death threw Mary into a debilitating depression for a time and foretold the deep, protracted periods of mourning she would experience later. William Willie Wallace, 1850 to 1862. He seems to have been the favorite of both of his parents, and his death began to decline in his mother's emotional stability. And Thomas Tad, 1853 to 1871, her last son. Mary, with her abiding interest in politics, became a helpmate to Lincoln in his political career. Among other things, she improved his wardrobe, something he gave little attention to, and summarized newspaper articles for him, and the two discussed political topics while she would give advice. Mary engaged in letter-writing campaigns and hosted social events, such as a strawberry party that drew 300 guests to the Lincoln home. When Lincoln was elected, he said, "This is an election won by both of us." She was intensely loyal to her husband. The two loved each other extremely throughout their life. When Lincoln was elected to a single term in the U.S. Congress, 1846 to 48, Mary and the children went with him to Washington, but soon was forced to travel to Kentucky to stay with her stepmother and step-siblings. After Lincoln has won the presidential election, Mary and him moved into the White House, and she began her career as the First Lady. It is unlikely any presidential wife whose lot it was to be First Lady during the Civil War would have escaped with her reputation intact. Times were simply too emotional, the fear and anger too intense, to allow that to happen. Though her position fulfilled her high social ambitions, Miss Lincoln's years in the White House mingled misery with triumph. While the Civil War dragged on, Southerners scorned her as a traitor to her birth, and citizens loyal to the Union suspected her of treason because of her Confederate family.
Before the Civil War, Mary assisted Lincoln when he was serving his 2-year term as a congressman by providing advices using her high-level education. She took care of the family she and Lincoln had built up. She also contributed to the Union Army and the Freedom Slave, the Sanitary Commission of Fear, an organization that helped raise a private charity for free slaves, and the Contraband Relief Association, another organization that gathered cloth for poor slaves. During the Civil War, she was remarkable for working as a volunteer nurse in the Union Hospital and used her knowledge to give military advices, often made unwise choices that fueled the attacks on her. She trusted a White House gardener, and he seemed to have abused that trust and leaked a presidential speech to the press before it was given. This made Mary untrustworthy to the citizens of the Union. Maintenance of the White House had been minimal. However, Mary took it upon herself to replace the old wallpaper and broken furniture and generally refurbished the interior of the old building. At another time, she might have been lauded, but in wartime, many people viewed it as an unnecessary extravagance. She also purchased many fashion clothing and decoration, including new china, an expensive artifact. Lincoln himself was very angry at how much she overspent her budget, even though Congress eventually passed two additional appropriation to cover these expenses. Many newspaper and Washington Observer decried her state dinner and other receptions as inappropriate, given the nation's circumstance, but others praised her for those demands. The viewpoint expressed frequently had as much to do with the person's or newspaper's support for Lincoln. Seeing her husband shot as he sat beside her was not the final blow to Mary's emotional stability, but was the worst one. She remained in mourning for the rest of her life, and occupied herself with writing to Congress for an increase in the pension they had granted her. No other presidential widow had ever been awarded a federal pension up to that point. Through much of her life, she swung between spending spree and a fear of poverty that had little basis in reality. After Lincoln's death, Mary arranged with a broker to sell her old clothing. When word leaked out, newspapers called her action disgraceful, low, sordid, ill-bred, and similar terms. She then traveled in Europe and the United Kingdom with her son Ted. Not long after they returned from Europe, the boy fell ill and died on July 15, 1871, after weeks of suffering. In 1875, 10 years after the death of her husband, her last surviving child, Robert, had her tried by a jury to determine if she was insane. This broke her heart and created a gap between her and her son. While this is going on, she also had $56,000 in government bound to pay. The court had her forcibly committed to an asylum in Batavia, Illinois, facing humiliation in which she endured for 3 months before friends could spring her. This episode, more than any other single event, that has shaped much of the public's perception of Mary Lincoln and also of Robert, who has been accused of engineering the trial to get his hand on his mother's money. The testimony in her first trial certainly placed her behavior within the realm of insanity as was understood in 1875, but a different conclusion would probably be reached by today's standard. Although it is likely that even a modern court might order some form of treatment, by Mary's own admission, she was self-medicating prior to her confinement, and she suggested that was the cause of her irrational behavior. After being released from the asylum, Mary returned to her sister in Springfield in 1876. She then spent the 4 years of her remaining life traveling around in Europe. Her health declined among her throughout her trip. She suffered from severe cataract, a symptom that reduced one's eyesight, and spinal cord injury. In 1881, she returned to her sister in Springfield and spent the rest of her life there. On July 15, 1882, she collapsed in her sister's residence and died because of stroke the next morning, at the age of 63.